how would you specifically find would-be terrorists who are going undetected?
I'm one of the 77%. I think this is a very difficult issue. And let me agree with much of what the Secretary and the Governor have said. Let me tell you what I think we have got to do. I think it's a two-pronged issue. Number one, our goal is to crush and destroy ISIS. What is the best way to do it? Well, I think there are some differences of opinion here, perhaps between the Secretary and myself. I voted against the war in Iraq because I thought unilateral military action would not produce the results that were necessary and would lead to the kind of unraveling and instability that we saw in the Middle East. I do not believe in unilateral American action. I believe in action in which we put together a strong coalition of forces, major powers and the Muslim nations. I think one of the heroes in a real quagmire.
So how relevant are you in this Democratic primary? If you're not a Democrat, you're not even in the primary. If you're not a Republican, you're not in the Republican primary, right? So essentially what will happen is the first or second primary will vote, and then it'll just snowball. So if the first four, Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina, there is a clear winner, one is just dominating with all the other ones, then that typically has been the indication that they're going to run the gauntlet. And so that's all we need. I think that this year is going to be a little bit differently, but Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina are February. So they're voting in February. Iowa, February 1st with the caucuses, and then South Carolina, February 27th. So it's spread out about a week in between each one of them. So those are the four most important American states. If you're not in Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina, it don't fucking matter. If you're not Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina, you don't fucking matter. You don't matter. Now, some people might make the argument, like me, that the March 1st, because there's about a dozen states that are voting, that would be the big Super Tuesday, and I think that's true. So March 1st, then they kind of sprinkle throughout the marches, but you probably have about a dozen states after March 1st. So perhaps a person, O'Malley, could survive, be in third place in Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina, and then when everybody, when the dozen states all vote, Georgia, Colorado, Arkansas, some other states, when the dozen on March 1st, there's March 1st voters, they could all vote for O'Malley, and then he actually makes a breakaway and he gets on through. So I don't think that's what's going to happen, but those states are more important than all the other states. So if Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina, second most important ones would be Virginia, Vermont, Texas, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Minnesota, Massachusetts, Georgia. Democrats abroad, I'm not sure, maybe that's just soldiers. Not just soldiers, but Democrats abroad is what Wikipedia is saying. Colorado, Arkansas, American Samoa. So American Samoa has their primary is more important than Kentucky, West Virginia, Arizona, Idaho, you fucking New York, Maryland, Connecticut. You guys are at the end. Nobody gives a shit by the time of Guam, California, D.C., South Dakota. By the time, after the first March 1st, we've already decided who the fuck, Hillary or Bernie. We've already decided it. By the time it gets to you, they're just being assholes by that time. They're trying to get a Secretary of State position, or they're trying to get some more shit out of you. That's the only reason it went to Kentucky when it was Obama versus Hillary, just because Hillary wanted to get some more shit out of Obama. These states, again, the relevant states. If you're Virginia, Vermont, Texas, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Minnesota, Massachusetts, Georgia, whoever Democrats abroad are, Colorado, Arkansas, American Samoa, Alabama are the March 1st voters, okay? March 1st, these are second tier. The top tier is Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina. Tier 2 people or states would be Alabama, American Samoa, Arkansas, Colorado, Democrats abroad, Georgia, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Vermont, Virginia. Okay, then March 5th is Louisiana, Nebraska, Maine. Okay, anyways. So if you're not in those initial states, I'm not saying it's irrelevant, but the amount of publicity and the amount of who actually is winning, who actually won the first primary, which is South Carolina, New Hampshire. So the superdelegates, the Democratic National Convention, all these primaries, all these caucuses don't even matter at all. So even if you are, a March 1st, you're on the second tier, you kind of matter. That's nothing. Overall, they're indirect elections. The Democratic Party presidential primaries and caucuses are indirect elections in which voters elect delegates to the 2016 Democratic National Convention. These delegates, in turn, directly elect the Democratic Party's presidential nominee. In some states, the party may disregard voters' selection of delegates, or selected delegates may vote for any candidate at the state or national convention. Non-binding primary or caucus. They don't even have to listen to the voters. You don't even have to do what the fuck all the primary voters, who went out and voted, oh, my vote's going to matter. Just like the Electoral College, they can vote whoever they want to vote. Typically, they go, in the line with their own citizens. But if there is no pressure, then they can do whatever they want to do. In other states, state laws and party rules require the party to select delegates according to votes, and delegates must vote for a particular candidate. Binding primary or caucuses. So some are binding, some aren't binding, depending on the states, right? Some are caucuses, and others aren't caucuses. Iowa is a caucus, and Iowa can suck my caucus. And Nevada is a closed caucus, so at least Iowa's semi-open, but Nevada can suck my closed caucus. So, let's see. There's 3,636 pledged delegates. So that's, nearly 4,000 people. Under the party's delegation selection rules, the number of pledged delegates allocated to each of the 50 U.S. states and Washington, D.C. is determined using a formula based on two main factors. Number one, proportion of votes each state gave to the Democratic candidate in the last three presidential elections. 2012, the number of electoral votes each state has in the United States Electoral College. So Kentucky has 8, right? So that'd be 8 that pledged delegates that'll be going, and then how the proportion of votes that each state gave to the Democratic candidate in the last 3 elections. So it seems like it's a very, whoever is really paying attention, I don't know who's in the middle of this shit, but there's a lot of weird distinctions here. There's 704 unpledged superdelegates, which include members of the U.S. House of Representatives and Senate, state and territorial governments, members of the Democratic National Committee, and other party leaders. Because of possible deaths, resignations, or the results of intervening or special elections, the final number of these superdelegates may be reduced before the convention. So this is where the fight is with these 4,000 people, with these 3,700 plus the 700, so that's about 4,400 people. So 4,400 people are going to be going to the Democratic. Then the DNC, they have their own rules, and really they're the one that set these rules, with Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina being the most fucking important states in the entire race. If anybody tries to move their election before February 1st, because that's what happened, I think, 4 years ago, people were trying to move their election first, because then that makes you a priority state. The fact that we're talking about Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina, the fact that these are on the tips of people's tongues, that gives them more power. That gives them a greater power. It gives them a greater sway. What does Iowa want? What does Nevada want? That's what these candidates have to answer, but they don't ask that about any of the other, states. Delaware. Who gives a fuck about Delaware? They vote in April 26th. So, if Delaware was to move their election up, even though they would lose, they'd be penalized half of their pledged delegates and all their unpledged delegates to the 2016 convention. So they would actually lose all the delegates that go to, if they were moved up, to January elections. Delaware would be the most important state. Everybody would be saying, what does Delaware want? What does the voters of Delaware want? But there would be no delegates going into the National Committee. But it wouldn't matter. It sets the pace for the entire election. Watch. Iowa is the first caucus, and people be, for 8 days, people be talking about who won in Iowa and who didn't win in Iowa. So let's say Hillary wins in Iowa. Oh, Hillary won, right? But who gives a shit, in New Hampshire, Bernie wins. So Hillary won, Bernie won. So it's 1-1, right? So then we have to wait another 14 days. So, it's the fucking delegates. It's the goddamn delegates by the time they get to the fucking end. They said that there's 46 pledged and 8 unpledged, and none of them have committed so far. They have a running total. So there's, only 54 people in Iowa actually matter. Only 54 people are the delegates that are going to vote in the Democratic national conventions where they just run away. So, not only were you as irrelevant as I had previously said, but you're actually more irrelevant than that. You've had these runaway conventions, right? So they could all get there, and they're going to pledge, and they said that they're going to vote for, let's say, Hitlery. Oh, we're going to vote for Hitlery. That's what they're going to do at the Democratic National Convention. Well, they get there, and then all of a sudden O'Malley just starts getting everybody in a terror and uproar. People are like real excited about him. Teddy Roosevelt did, he tried to take off with the Republican National Convention and wound up splitting the convention in half. And so that could happen too, right? O'Malley could split in half, or everybody could just go into O'Malley. So the convention at the time, the setting of the convention could totally change everything. So if you don't know shit about the convention, the delegates, superdelegates, and you probably don't even pay attention to the primary when you're going to fucking vote. Really, as a person in Virginia, I'm going to be on March 1st, going to want to be relevant with this primary election, then I should be calling Iowa voters. Iowa, hey, vote for Bernie. Calling New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina. If I could get my main push out there, my one little measly vote don't fucking mean shit. Have a Bernie shirt, have Bernie signs, be passing this shit around. Bernie, Bernie, Bernie. That's all people should be talking about if I was campaigning for Bernie. Because that would have a greater impact. That would have a greater impact on his campaign instead of just being like, well, I'm voting for him and just thinking I'm like the king of all voters. Whoever I vote for will just win. No, it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with how many people you can get to vote like you. You're just one vote. And even so that you're even insignificant, right? You're just a primary voter. You're not even a fucking delegate or super delegate. So they'll just say, oh, some people like Bernie. Who gives a shit? I'm going to vote for Hillary anyways. You don't fucking matter. So, this matters if you want to be a player. You need to understand the rules to the game. He who understands...
Senator Sanders, hold on one moment, please. I'm going to ask the Secretary... You should put that aside for now and go outside.
Well, I don't agree.
Love live streaming. I get like 25% of what's going on. What's going on? I don't know. They keep on speaking in chunks. Blah, 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 blah. It's getting good. They're talking about Gaddafi and
With
Libya.
that, because we will not get the support on the ground in Syria to dislodge ISIS if the fighters there who are not associated with ISIS,
Talking
but
the whole
whose
time.
principal goal
What
is
the
getting
fuck?
rid of Assad, don't